time tracking in the AI era. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today, Billables AI. Billables AI is an AI-powered legal timekeeping platform that captures time automatically from everyday workflows like Microsoft, Zoom, and Adobe. No timers required. It generates accurate client and matter matched time entries with detailed narratives to help firms reduce administrative effort and improve realization. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat box for you to find out more information at this link. And we are joined today by Nancy Jang. Nancy Jang is the co-founder of Billables AI. Nancy, we are excited to have you here with us today. You can go ahead and start sharing and take it from here.
Thank you so much, Joy. Really excited to be here. I will go ahead and share my screen. Um, Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Nancy. I'm really excited to be here. I'd like to start with just an intro of myself. I know it's always kind of awkward to have a webinar where I'm talking at you. So as much as possible, let's try to keep it conversational. I'd love to hear in the chat, who's joining this webinar, where you're calling in from. And yeah, let's enjoy this time today that we're going to spend talking about time tracking. But first off, I'm Nancy. I'm the co-founder of Billables AI. We are an automated timekeeping and task intelligence platform that is personalized and powered by AI. And I am also a former timekeeper and timekeeper wrangler. So I've seen it from both sides as someone who had to submit their timesheets weekly and then later on trying to wrangle the team to do it. So a lot of the problems that we'll be talking about today in this space really hit home for me personally, and I think probably will resonate with you all as well. So what we're going to do today is cover a few key topics. First, we'll talk about the root problem. What are the trends that we're seeing in time leakage and timekeeping in today's era? Then we'll spend a lot of time talking about the opportunity, right? Focus on the positive. How can we reimagine billing with AI? We'll talk about the best ways to evaluate tools and find the right solution for you. We'll talk about the future of billing and kind of beyond the billable hour. What does that mean in terms of technology and how that can help you as your firm evolves? And then, of course, I want to make sure we're answering any questions that you may have. So we'll have some Q&A at the end. If you do have questions along the way, feel free to drop that into the chat. We're always happy to kind of maybe take some topical ones that are relevant as the conversation is going on. But today we'll first start with the problem. Why does time slip through the cracks? And so we've all kind of seen the stats, right? We know that to track time is to inevitably lose time. I think that's a Nietzsche quote, maybe. But I think a lot of folks who've been in this space for a while have kind of seen stats similar to this, which is that when billers log their time after the fact, they tend to lose a lot of it. And they lose more of it the more time that drags on between when they're actually doing the work and when they bill it. In fact, on average, lawyers only bill for about 30% of the time they work. And a lot of it is due to this delay and this kind of time leakage. And so, why is time tracking so leaky? I think the reason behind it is that timekeepers are human and humans are not stopwatches. So, in the best case scenario, with a lot of training and habitual conditioning, you may become a solid contemporaneous biller, but even the strongest billers will end up missing time the second an unexpected call comes through or they step away from the office. And so, there's this concept of flow state. And this is a concept that's been popularized over the last couple of decades. It's kind of also known as the zone. It's this mental state of complete absorption and focus around an activity. And it's usually characterized by like effortless engagement. You're kind of losing self-consciousness. You have this distorted sense of time. You're really immersed in the work. And for lawyers who operate in the knowledge industry, achieving and maintaining flow state is really critical to getting the work done because of the complex nature of the work. And so, if you think about being deep in your work, then having to pause and create a time entry and write down a narrative and then pivot right back to what you were doing, that is incredibly disruptive. It's not easy. And the psychological effect is kind of the underpinning of why we're so bad at timekeeping. It is really disruptive to kind of have to stop what you're doing to do an entirely different task, which is billing and timekeeping. And then oftentimes it takes a while to get back into that flow state. On average, 23 minutes, but obviously that varies a lot depending on the person. And so, kind of understanding the root of the problem, let's see how these issues manifest in day-to-day scenarios. So, we'll talk through some real-world pain points. First off, trigger warning, you're about to see some quotes that may be all too familiar. So let us know if any of the following personas resonate. Do you see yourself? Do you see someone on your team, a lawyer you work with? Does this kind of encapsulate the issues that they're seeing? So the first persona is the constant context switcher. We hear this a lot from senior managing partners. Oftentimes, the higher up you go, the more responsibility, context switching, the larger your plate and load gets. And so, as you're switching between many calls and emails and working on a bunch of matters at once, things just fall through the cracks. So, that's what is happening in this constant context switching. The other persona is the forgetful filer. So many folks are resigned to kind of not billing contemporaneously, so they recreate their time at the end of the day or week. They're combing through old emails, they're looking through their call logs, they're kind of browsing back through their calendar and piecing together what their billable time was. And as we saw in some of the stats earlier, this often leads to underbilling and time left on the table. The narrative novice is a persona we see a lot, especially in mid-sized firms that are really trying to kind of foster growth of, new associates, paralegals, because the art of billing is really nuanced and it's, kind of this blend of art and science. And partners and administrators spend precious hours training and correcting, but a lot of it is kind of having to learn on the go and figuring out the nuance of what language to include or avoid, what clients will flag. And this can be a huge time suck for everyone involved. Another profile that we see a lot is the productive but penniless. So this is something that describes, the fact that you may be working 8, 10, 12 hours a day, but when you look back at your billables, you see that it only reflects maybe a few hours that have actually been billed. And you know that it wasn't that you weren't working, but yet that time goes somewhere. It kind of leaks. It doesn't end up on the timesheet. And it's frustrating because that work is there. And then the last persona that we hear more and more these days is the on the go overlooker. So more and more people are taking their work with them, right? A lot of people are working remote. Work might be happening away from the desk. Maybe you're on your phone. Maybe you're dialing in from another location. But as you're kind of working in these different environments, it's extra easy to forget to bill. And so a lot of time gets leaked that way. So we'll take a moment to kind of pause and reflect a little bit on which of these timekeeping personas do you relate to? This could be either a reflection of yourself or, someone that you have in mind that you may be wanting to kind of solve and help, modernize their billing practices. Share and vote on which of these timekeeping personas kind of resonates. Great. We'll give it a minute for folks to enter in their persona that resonates. There's the context switcher, flipping back and forth between things, the forgetful filer. Oh, okay, forgetful filer. Yep, that seems to be the top, followed closely by the on-the-go overlooker, which is definitely something we've seen more and more lately. and then the constant context switcher, which is especially true when you're dealing with multiple matters. You have senior billers who are just kind of juggling a lot on their plate. So thanks so much for sharing. And apologies if that was triggering. We know that, it's a lot of emotional baggage that sometimes comes with billing because it is such a core, necessary, and painful part of our lives. All right. So if those personas are triggering, rest easy, take a breath. Because at the end of the day, it's not really you, it's not the person, it's really the process. The process of manual time tracking is broken. And that's really what we're here to help solve and to talk about today. And so, one thing I kind of just wanted to step back and reflect on is, obviously we've all been surrounded by news and a lot of headlines about AI and all the different applications, especially in the legal world. But I think a lot of that has actually been misguided because so much of what we're hearing and reading is about how AI is revolutionizing the core workflow. So document drafting, research summarization, et cetera. And these things are great, but they also could have the effect of reducing your billable time and your billable income. So there's this kind of like weird reverse incentive in some ways. And a lot of times, an unsexy use case like time tracking is overlooked. But we think this is a really interesting way of using technology, generative AI technology, because it's actually helping you recover more time. It helps you reduce non-billable time. Unfortunately, we are not able to bill the time that we spend billing, right? So the more time that we have to spend on it, the less that we can focus on actual billable work. And at the end of the day, it's tools like this that help empower and not replace. And I think that's a big part of the conversation that's ongoing right now, and a reason why so many firms have kind of come to us to really be one of their first forays into the AI space. And so, what is that opportunity? Let's talk about how we're kind of tackling this space. And note that this is a really new genre of technology. So, we all know generative AI in kind of its current form and its current power really has only come about in the last few years. And especially in the world of timekeeping, it's something that only recently has technology actually been able to advance enough to be able to solve this process from end to end. So imagine what if AI could automate all the most hated parts of billing? So we talked to hundreds, thousands of lawyers, and we heard over and over again that billing is the bane of their existence. And so we asked, why is it so painful? And the answer is because even though there has been some evolution of, solutions along the lines of like digital timers, so much of billing is still manual today, right? A lot of times people are using maybe a timer on their computer, but they still have to start and stop it. It's still quite interruptive. They still have to write the narratives. They still have to, build compliant time entries, assign task and activity codes, things like that. And what's really exciting is AI has advanced now to where it can actually do all of these core elements. So, not just the time tracking, which arguably is the most basic rudimentary part of it, but also the narrative writing and also adhering to client billing guidelines. So, imagine a digital assistant that quietly helps capture all your work activity. You read or send an email on your phone, it's captured. You respond back to that same thread on your laptop, it's also captured. You edit a document on your laptop or research on your browser. You get a call from a customer. All of these things can be captured digitally and passively. And by passively, we mean it's working in the background. It's not interruptive to you. It's kind of invisible to you. Obviously, you'll have to set it up, but once it's going, it's just running. And so these modern timekeeping solutions record these emails, calls, calendar events, and the metadata behind it, not the actual, storage of the data itself. And that helps ensure more complete time entry. And this goes beyond the office. So a lot of you said, I think the second most popular persona was the on-the-go overlooker, right? You're doing more and more of your work, outside of the office. You're kind of working virtually, remote. And so in this world in which the vast majority of firms are operating in this way, it's really important that you are able to capture that time in those different environments. And so when the AI is always on and kind of running passively in the background, you do end up capturing more time. It's not reliant on a human to kind of stop and remember and capture things. And so what we've seen is across the industry, 10 to 30% more billable time is captured by AI timekeeping solutions, which is huge. If you imagine, what that translates to in terms of the number of hours, in terms of, applying rates to that and the revenue that comes in, this is really substantial and key to your core business. And so some of the things that AI can do is reduce the mundane, repetitive tasks. So, for example, AI can help write narratives that are, high quality, that follow kind of industry best practices in terms of naming conventions, grammatical, adherence, uh, you know, past or present tense, things like that. You can use AI to kind of generate, refine, and tweak narratives that you're writing, or you can solve it from the get-go. So we've seen AI as a really powerful tool in ensuring billing guideline compliance. So you can upload your client billing guidelines, and AI can actually scrape that and extract all the rules from it and apply it to the entries that the tool generates automatically from the get-go. So you're not having to kind of correct it after the fact, but it's actually imbued into the entries themselves when they are generated. And so that can be done through a number of ways, automatic ingestion of the client billing guidelines, even spelling out in natural language, like, hey, we use this language and we don't use that language, and applying that at a user level, a firm level, a client level, or all of the above, a combination of those, because you may have firm guidelines that are different than your client guidelines that might be more nuanced when it comes to your individual user and how they prefer to bill. So think about all those things coming together and AI kind of automating that end-to-end time entry process. So all the components of that time entry, from having that client and matter assigned, including the UTBMS codes, if that's applicable. AI can identify relevant work streams and figure out what to bill. So out of everything that you're doing throughout the day, not all of it's necessarily billable. AI can really reason and figure out, like, hey, you have a dentist appointment on your calendar. That's not a billable event, but that meeting with this external party, that's probably a billable event. It'll create a time entry for that. Being able to calculate durations super precisely, that's a huge benefit. Obviously, probably one of the core benefits of a solution like this. And then generating those compliant narratives that are detailed and adhere to your client, firm, or individual billing guidelines. So at the end of the day, having a tool that kind of automates everything will reduce the time spent. So you're not having to kind of draft all of this yourself. Imagine having these entries already created that get you 90% of the way there. And one thing that's really important to note is the way that these solutions operate. The how is as important as the why. And so what we mean by that is, you know, it's really important to know exactly how this data is being captured. And there's a number of different providers that have different mechanisms, implementations. On our end, one thing that we have been really mindful to do from the beginning is to make sure that we're collecting the minimum amount of data in the most privacy-friendly way. Obviously, firms are dealing with very, very confidential information. And so we never require blanket screen monitoring access to your computer. Most people kind of assume there's some big brother element to what's happening. But if done right, you can definitely have a tool that gets to all of what I just shared with you, all of the automations and the level of detail and the accuracy without having a monitoring software that sits there and watches your every keystroke. And so the way that you kind of get to that in the most privacy friendly way is you lean into key workflow integrations. So for our tool in particular, we have built out painstakingly so integrations with all of the key work software providers. So Microsoft Office 365, Google Workspace, Word, Excel, a bunch of voice over IP providers. And what's happening here is we're integrating directly with the APIs of these trusted partners. We're adhering to their security standards, which are really high, obviously enterprise level, right? When you're talking about tools like Microsoft. And that is how we're getting the data to be able to generate the time entries. And therefore, it's not reliant on screen monitoring. And some of the benefits of this integration-led approach are one, that it's secure and private. So we hear from a lot of firms and a lot of lawyers that they want the automation, but they don't want invasive screen monitoring. So this has been proven to be a really strong solution that kind of helps set their minds at ease. The other benefit of this kind of integration-led approach is accuracy. So because we're getting this metadata directly from the source, directly from Microsoft, from Google, from Zoom, it is very precise, right? So it knows exactly the time that you are spending working. It's not overcounting. It's not really, uh, hallucinating, right? It's actual metadata that's coming through a direct integration. That part is not generated. And then the last bit is that it's device agnostic. So again, back to that on the go overlooker. When you are sending emails from your phone or joining a Zoom call from your iPad, all of that gets captured through these integrations, and you don't have to install something on each device. It's just automatic. And in terms of how this actually happens, I want to spend some time doing kind of a quick demo of how this can actually manifest. So I'll show you what this could look like if you put yourselves in the shoes of a timekeeper. So imagine you're working throughout the day, you're taking calls, you're doing research, you're working on documents, and while you're working, your Billables AI dashboard, right, is just populating with time entries. So these are all time entries that have been automatically generated, and it includes all of the core components of your billing, right? So, for example, for email, it'll show you the source of the activity and the actual email that you sent that led to this time entry being created. This is through our Microsoft Outlook integration. You can see here that the time spent drafting that email was zero point 0.2 hours. We automatically assign it to a client and matter from, your practice management system, or, from your uploaded list. We can automatically assign an activity or task code, and then we generate a narrative description that kind of out of the box adheres to industry best practices. All of this is presented to you as a first draft of your time entries, where you can easily approve it with one click, or you can always modify and control every element. And so that is a huge part of how we build trust and ensure that you still have the final say in what gets billed. And the most powerful part of the AI is that it really learns from your input. So if you've used ChatGPT, this should not be an unfamiliar concept, right? As you are kind of responding and making corrections, it's getting better at learning from your preferences. So in this case, if I were to change this time entry and revise it from past tense to present tense, and maybe, spell out regarding, and make that approval, it will learn and start to generate time entries that adhere to what I have deemed to be a good, approvable time entry. And so the more that you use it, the better it gets. And what we've heard from a lot of folks is just having this draft of all of your entries populated automatically. You don't even have to come to the billable site. You don't have to start and stop a timer. This is all just here ready for you at the end of the day, end of the week, wherever you want to do your billing. This reduces the time spent on time tracking dramatically, especially with narratives. I think it reduces the narrative writing time by 90%, and then the rest of the time is just spent kind of reviewing the entries that are generated. Some questions that have kind of come up in the chat that I want to address since it's really relevant to what I'm sharing here is, can we get daily journals emailed to users with daily activity listed? Yeah, we do have kind of analytics summarization that shows, time spent by day, by month, And this is actually a huge part of where we see the future of, our platform going is giving you that insight to be able to show you, um, how your time is spent by client, by matter, and what that trend line looks like, across a certain period of time. There was also a question about our integrations. So, one thing to note is, not only do we integrate with a number of different work software like Microsoft, Adobe, Google, Zoom, et cetera, we also integrate with many practice management systems, and that's a growing list. The question in the chat was around Orion, which we do integrate with. We also integrate with SharePoint, Lean Law, MyCase, and Clio, and have a number of other practice management software where we have kind of optimized workflows. So it's not a direct integration, but we have many customers on those platforms that have some automation set up that we can share more detail about. But that's just a little snippet of what that kind of time tracking in action could look like. And I think what's really compelling that I kind of touched on is that AI can really show you how your time is truly spent. So, really reflecting back to you and showing you as an administrator or you as a timekeeper where your time is going and what that looks like in your day to day. And so, what we've heard from our customers and those in the industry is that a tool like this has really helped revolutionize their practice. So even in the case of, Ziegler Law Group, they are a complex litigation firm and they don't actually have clients that they are kind of billing hourly. They have a lot of court mandated requirements of how they have to submit their time and it's basically contingent, but they still have to track their time and be able to kind of provide that level of detail to justify kind of, that payment. And they had struggled with properly billing their time in the past and would often forget to bill. And so what they found is that Billables AI, after trying a number of different tools, it really revolutionized their approach to time tracking and helped them capture 30% more billable time. One story that we heard from a managing partner at a mid-sized firm is this is real. This was someone who used to spend more than an hour a day creating their time, reliving their day, essentially trying to figure out like all the emails they sent, all the calendar events that they attended and the documents they were working on and trying to, do that at the end of a long workday. And after using billables, this was on day 2, he actually set a timer for himself right before he went into Billables AI to kind of review his time entries. And he found that he was able to review and approve all of his time for the day in 3 minutes, which was a huge, huge reduction in time spent from what he was used to. We've also seen really good feedback in terms of being able to kind of capture that additional time that helps recoup the annual investment in the product and having the API integrations and the accuracy that comes with getting that metadata directly from the source, from Microsoft, from Google, etc. And I think Ernie, the attorney, said it best. If you are a lawyer who's billing by the hour, a tool like Billables AI really ensures that every one of them counts. So, um, one question that we get a lot is how do we find the right AI solution for you? And I think this is kind of related to Lindsay's question in the chat, which is, do you have stats of how much time timekeepers on average are missing and how much more they bill once they switch to Billables AI? So what we've seen is that people using billables AI are able to recover 10 to 30% more time. Now, obviously, that varies depending on your current time tracking processes, but usually the cost of the software is recovered within a day or two because you're really capturing a lot more time that you would have otherwise missed. And we really encourage all of our customers to do that analysis because you can see it quite clearly in the numbers. You can see what people were billing before, what they're able to capture with billables, the amount of time that they're spending on their their timesheets is dramatically reduced. And we've seen that over and over and over again. But it's a really great point that, it is important to choose the right solution for you. And so, what we have put together is a bit of a rubric for you to evaluate the right AI solutions, which is not about trying everything, but it's about finding the right fit. And so, we kind of think about it as the 5 C's, which are completion, compliance, connectivity, clarity, and context. So, I'll go through each of these briefly to kind of share what we mean about these key criteria and why it's important when you're evaluating an AI solution. So, for completion, this is really about end-to-end time entry creation. And when you're thinking about AI solutions, it's really important to look for that automated capture across email, calendar, documents, calls, meetings, pretty much of your workday as you can possibly capture. You want to make sure it's automated as much as possible and it is really all encompassing, as well as across devices. And like I mentioned in the beginning, a huge part of the time tracking process is not just the time tracking itself, but it's also writing the narratives, making sure that it's reflective of the substance of the work performed, that there are the right task and activity codes and clients and matters assigned. And the thing to ask yourself as you're kind of considering solutions is, does the system create complete bill ready time entries from start to finish? Is it more than just the duration and the time captured, but is it also giving you all the other elements that you know you owe the client? The second criteria is compliance. So this is really about built-in security and standards. So some things to look for is privacy first data collection. So wherever possible, avoiding unnecessary monitoring. If you can avoid it, it's not necessary to have screen monitoring software installed on your computer. Most of our customers don't have that at all. We actually have many firms that use pure integrations to capture their activity. Auto application of firm and client billing guidelines. So being able to kind of ingest those guidelines, have it apply to all the time entries automatically, having it learn from you to make sure that, what you approve and send out is meeting the bar of what the client demands when it comes to their bills. And then strong security posture. So making sure that all data is encrypted, that you have limited access and strict vendor controls, and that you are, holding your vendors to account in terms of building enterprise level secure software. So the question to ask yourself is, will this stand up to client scrutiny, audits, and security reviews? The third element is connectivity. So this is really speaking to kind of an integration-led architecture. And this is kind of a hot topic in the industry. So the things to look out for as it relates to this criteria is you're looking for native integrations with email, calendar, document systems, and practice management systems. This is really important again because it helps you get that accuracy. You're getting these timestamps directly from Zoom. You're not trying to guess, right? Like how much time was spent in a meeting. It allows for that API-based connection, which actually works across devices. So once you integrate with Microsoft Outlook, for example, or Google Mail, that is a one-time connection that happens at setup, and then it's capturing activity no matter where you're logging in and sending email. And you're getting that precision directly from the source. So the thing to ask here is the system really powered by deep integrations, or is it kind of surface level data pulls? Obviously, you want the former. The fourth criteria is clarity. So this is something that I think we don't talk about enough as it relates to AI tools and software in general. And it relates to that ease of use and adoption. And as administrators, I think you have seen this come to light time and time again, which is, you may have the best promise of a solution at your hands, but if it isn't easy to intuit, if it isn't easy to use and adoption is not there, it doesn't really help. And so the thing to look for here is really clean, low friction interface and UI that's designed with consumer grade usability. So really, trying to use software that can be incredibly simple and user friendly. Transparency is also a huge part of the conversation. You hear a lot about this kind of AI black box. And what's really key is making sure as you're evaluating solutions that you and your users can really see, trust, and control the suggestions and the data and the output. And then lastly, minimal training required. And this is for both timekeepers and administrators, and just making sure that you're not spending your precious time, having to go through many onboarding sessions and training sessions, that this can kind of be picked up really easily. And that's really, really important for the success of any tool to work. And so the question to ask yourself here is this experience simple enough that people will actually use it? And then the last criteria is context. So this relates to the AI power behind these types of solutions. So the things you want to look for is that it really learns kind of detailed billing nuance. It can pick up on how narratives are written and formatted. We have personally witnessed many debates, even within a firm, around do you use a semicolon or a period, right? People have very, very vigorous conversations around this topic. And there's no right or wrong answer. A lot of it is the nuance of, that biller and what they prefer, the client and what their rules are. And AI can really learn from these types of preferences automatically and kind of apply them to future instances. We want a solution that gets smarter over time, again, by learning, not just from settings, right? We're not trying to create a programmer out of you where you have to kind of code in every rule. I think the power of AI is that it can really learn from actual user behavior. So instead of you having to tell it, use this language and don't use that language, which you can do, it will also just pick up on implicit actions. So if you're approving time entries and you're making certain edits, or you're approving entries that are kind of structured in a certain way, it will learn from that automatically without you having to necessarily code it yourself. And then the other element that's really important is adaptability across users, clients, and within the firm. And being able to have that personalization reflected at those different levels. And the question to ask here is, will this reduce manual corrections as the system learns our standards? It should be getting easier and better as time goes on. So if we think about what this can look like beyond hourly billing, this is a huge topic right now in the industry, right? What is going to happen to the billable hour? And what we've seen from our customers and just the feedback that we've been getting is that modern timekeeping is really more about, the analytics and the insights than the actual time itself. And so if we think about some of the trends that we're observing, there's a few things to keep in mind. Billing models will vary. They do today, they'll continue to evolve, but time will kind of always continue to be somewhat of the universal unit of measure. It's the most finite kind of metric. It is consistent across practitioners, across markets and industries. And we see that as continuing to be like a core unit of measure. The other thing that's important to note is a AI timekeeping solution can help you understand productivity, not just time. So you can gain visibility into where hours are spent. You can help identify efficiency gaps and find training opportunities. A lot of times we see that, client expectations are increasing in this world. There's more clients demanding transparency. They want more predictable pricing, and AI-enabled insights really helps build that trust with the client and that trust in billing. These AI tools can also help make informed staffing and resource resourcing decisions. So you can kind of analyze patterns across cases and teams to figure out like if a matter is being staffed properly, is the pricing actually right and reflective of the amount of time spent? Do you have, a resource imbalance in terms of how you're putting folks against certain projects and clients and matters? Enhancing lawyer well-being is a huge part of the conversation. This is a tough job, it's a tough industry, and billing is unfortunately one of the toughest and most hated parts of it. And so, reducing the stress of kind of reconstructing time and having to enter time really lowers burnout and helps retain talent. And I think the most important element of time tracking tools in the AI era is how it helps future-proof the practice. So, we know that AI won't necessarily replace lawyers, but lawyers who use AI may replace lawyers who don't. And I think the application of an AI time tracking tool is one key way in which that can really help separate those two camps of practitioners. So with that, we'll open it up to some questions. I see a few already in the chat. And Joy, I believe you're going to help kick off some of the moderation of the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nancy. And as a reminder, if you do have questions, you can send those to everyone in the chat box, and we will get to them as we have time. So I will kind of go down the list as they came through. Someone asked, they said, I am assuming an agent is installed on the workstation to perform the tracking. Is the agent single sign-on and automatically logs in the user upon logging?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we actually have a number of different ways to kind of capture the activity. One of which is, an optional desktop app that you can install, and it does kind of monitor the apps that you choose to track. So it doesn't just screen capture everything. You can kind of choose what you want it to have access to. But by and large, a lot of our tracking actually comes through these integrations where we have an API integration with Microsoft and we're getting not screenshots of your emails, but just the timestamps of emails that you're working on. And that's how we're able to kind of create those time entries. And so it's actually a lot less intrusive and a lot more within your control and accurate.
Great, thank you. Um, Next, so okay, we currently don't currently have a PMS. Will this solution be as effective with just a DMS? We use NetDocuments.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of practice management providers out there. We work with a lot of the big ones, and then we work with firms that don't have any or use NetDocs or, have their own kind of bespoke system. And so at the end of the day, we actually work with any practice management software or setup. It's just a matter of getting the clients and matters into billables, and that's how we basically match your activity, right? We'll automatically match it to a client and matter within your roster. And that can be imported and exported in a number of different ways. So yes, we work with a lot of firms that are in that exact situation.
Thank you. And I know you talked a lot about privacy and meeting those requirements, but this question is specifically for phone calls or Zoom meetings. Would that mean it is listening to the conversations to draft the narrative?
Yeah, so for phone calls and Zoom meetings, we're actually getting the metadata of the meetings itself from our Zoom integration, from Teams we're integrated with. We also have like voice over IP integrations with RingCentral 8x8. We have Google Meet. We don't record and listen to the conversations or even access the transcript. So again, our philosophy is to really get only the minimum amount of data needed to generate a time entry. And right now, that doesn't include kind of the transcript or listening in or recording the call. It may be something that we add in as an option later on, but our philosophy is to always make that opt in. It's not required for you to still capture the time and get time entries.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that. So this question says, interesting. When it is tracking time in Word or for drafting a document, does it track time based on how long the document is open or how long it is actively being reviewed, edited. For example, if I started working on a Word document and minimized it to work on something else, would the time spent on the Word document still be tracked, or would it pause since I'm working on something else?
Really great question. We get this one a lot. So it is only tracking your active time. So let's say you open a Word document and then you go take a lunch break, or you get distracted, someone comes in your office and you end up having conversation. Just because the document is open doesn't mean it's just running the clock. That is really where our integrations come into play and our accuracy comes into play. So we're capturing the time that you're spending typing in the document. If you're scrolling in it and kind of reading, but there's like some, scrolling happening on the page, that gets captured. But if you remain idle, again, if you open a doc and then leave, it will stop the clock. So you don't have to worry about starting and stopping a timer, about it overcounting. It is very precise to that core activity.
Thank you. That was an interesting question. Okay, we have lots of questions coming in, so I'll keep on going. Is it only desktop, laptop based, or is there functionality on cell phones?
Yeah, really great question. So, a lot of our integrations do actually work across devices. So, email and meetings tend to be the ones that are most commonly happening across devices, and those actually work no matter where you are sending email or joining a meeting. So, once you integrate with, let's say, Microsoft Outlook, which is a one-time, authorization, anywhere you're sending email, whether it's from your laptop, your desktop, your iPad, your phone, if you're joining a Zoom call or a Teams call from your iPad, all of that's captured without you having to install something on your cell phone, on your tablet. There are some integrations that are limited to desktop or that you'd have to install by device. So, for example, like browser research that is usually tied to like a desktop or a laptop, but a lot of the kind of core activities does work across cell phones as well. And then voice over IP is also another one that is captured no matter where those calls are coming in from or wherever you're making them.
Great, that was definitely a question in there, so thank you for that. This one's a two-part question. Does Billables have an API direct to Adorant for real-time update to the accounting system as well as available matters and I manage for DMS data? Second part is if so, is it possible to stop the transmission to accounting system during month-end process, but still be able to have time entered in billables by timekeepers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a number of automated workflows that can be set up for firms that are on Adirond and other practice management tools. We don't have a direct API integration in this particular case. We do with others, but we still can set up, bespoke automations where clients and matters that are added in an Adirond can be synced to billables, and then the time entries can also be generated in a format that's friendly to Adirond. A lot of this is kind of bespoke setup. A lot of firms have kind of customized settings with their practice management system. So we kind of take it on a case by case basis, but it is very much possible to kind of sync no matter kind of what system you're using. And then the second part of the question around, is it possible to stop transmission to accounting system during the month end process? We actually do have a feature that allows you to kind of pause the time tracking entirely. We also have capabilities for folks to manually add time if they want to. So the answer is yes, we can do all of those things, and it's just a matter of how it should best be set up for your firm. And
Um,
actually, I'm gonna like expand on that question a little bit because one thing that we've heard a lot is, even firms that have adopted billables and they have users that are kind of relying on our platform to help them. They're people who normally would kind of create their time entries after the fact. They also have people that do want to still bill contemporaneously and manually enter time, but as just like a safety precaution. So we actually have a number of features that are have been rolling out and more coming that allow even those manual contemporaneous billers to do what they're doing, what they're used to doing, but then billables will help auto suggest time that we think they may have forgotten by using AI to kind of compare what we capture with what they've noted. And that really helps, any type of biller to be able to take advantage of this technology.
Wow, Nancy, sounds like you thought of it all.
We spent a lot of time thinking about this, so
Absolutely. Okay, next question we have that's coming in. Does this type of solution apply to firms or attorneys who don't bill out hourly?
yes, absolutely. We actually do have a number of firms that are on flat fee, on contingency, some on, retainer or subscription. And what we've heard by and large is this data is still incredibly important. And when you're not billing hourly, it's actually even harder to get this information, right? Because you're not, as a firm, in the practice of kind of logging every point one. And so let's say you're a flat fee firm. You still need to know how much time people are spending on different clients and matters, on different types of tasks. And that's the way that you can set your fees. But a lot of times firms are kind of setting those fees based on a hunch, based on maybe some historic estimates, but they don't have the time or the data or the diligence to actually compare that to the actual time and figure out, like, are you making money in the end, right? You may be setting a flat fee at a projected, hourly commitment that you end up going way over. And so we have a lot of flat fee firms that use us to help shine a light on what's actually happening with the amount of time spent on different tasks and to set their fees properly.
Perfect, thank you. And then are there limitations to what legal billing platforms Billables AI can be integrated with?
The short answer is no. We obviously have certain partners that we are really deeply embedded with. So SharePoint is one, Clio is another. We are also integrated with MyCase, Lean Law. We have Centerbase and Orion integrations. Um, but we work with firms on pretty much every practice management system out there, and it just depends on the setup and kind of the ways that we can kind of work with each firm and administrator to automate some of those workflows. So, without getting into the nuts and bolts of what that might mean in specific instances, the short answer is like we are able to kind of work with a broad variety of billing platforms.
Perfect. And then another question just came in. Are there any alerts that can be configured for attorneys who have not billed the minimum amount per week?
Really great question. This is actually something we are building out and will be enabling soon as part of kind of our expansion from beyond just time tracking, but helping with, fulfillment of hours and helping with administrators to just kind of keep the team on track. So coming soon, Mark.
Perfect. How do you differentiate between the different software that are out there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one, I will say this category in general is relatively new because a lot of the capability to kind of do the complex time entry creation really didn't come about until I would say the last few years as the generative AI models have advanced. And so it is a new and growing space. So we're just excited that people are kind of thinking about this use case. What we've seen though, as the category has been growing, is by and large, the implementation tends to fall into this kind of screen monitoring and screenshot surveillance camp, right? A lot of times, the way that the time tracking software works is you install something and it just captures everything that you're doing on your computer. It takes screenshots every few seconds and then it kind of tries to figure out what you're working on. And ours is quite different in terms of implementation. We are really one of the only ones that have this like full stack integration based methodology where we have these API integrations with your work providers like Microsoft and Google and Zoom, et cetera. And that's the primary mechanism for getting the data. We do have a supplemental, screen monitoring that you can opt into, but it's not required. It's not core to how we capture the data. And that kind of privacy friendly approach is pretty different. I would say it's taken us a long time to kind of build out those integrations, as you can imagine, working with Microsoft to adhere to those security standards and getting that accuracy down, but it's yielded really great results.
Thanks, Nancy. And I'll let you read the question from Anthony for yourself, but I will read it out loud for the attendees to hear. But there's multiple parts on this question, so I'll let you read that. But for all the attendees, can you provide more detail into how it matches matters/client information to a time entry? Would it offer possible matters matches, or would it flag time that are billed to different matters? For example, if I was meeting with an attorney and they billed their time to a separate matter than I billed my time, would it flag that as something to look out for?
Yeah, so it's taking in a number of signals to try to infer the best match. There's not just one way in which it kind of matches to a client and matter, but some examples of what it looks at is, for example, for email, it'll look at the correspondence and identify like, hey, this person you're emailing with, their address is coming from domain.com and that matches this client. For documents, for example, like through our SharePoint integration, we can see what document you're working on and that it was saved in a certain folder named after a certain matter. So we might infer that it's, that work is related to that matter. And that just depends on the integration and the source of activity, but it's using a number of different signals to try to guess at the best client matter match. And even if it gets it wrong, when you correct it, it learns from that. So it builds new associations and kind of recognizes, hey, last time this type of work relating to these people or these topics was assigned to this client matter. So it'll opt towards that.
Thank you. I'm going to put a contact information for Nancy. We have a couple more questions to ask Nancy, but if people are having to log off right at time, I want to give them the opportunity to reach out to you directly as well. But next question. Are the entries worded to meet insurance billing guidelines? Can it be taught by users to use specific terminology?
Absolutely. So you can actually set certain client billing guidelines for the firm. So as an administrator, you can um, put in certain guidelines like use the phrase review and analyze instead of research. You can upload client billing guidelines, and that could be like firm level ones. You might have certain firm rules around how to bill. And then at a client level, you can also say this particular client has certain preferences around their billing. You can upload their OCGs and it'll apply to any entries that are generated for that particular client. So there's a lot of control and ways that, we ensure that that it really adheres to those guidelines. And then, Joy, do you mind if I answer one question that I think is particularly relevant to this group as maybe one of the last ones?
Absolutely.
So Brittany asked, what can administrators see if they are not a timekeeper? I think this is a huge one, especially for this audience, and something that we are building out a lot, which is the kind of analytics features that allow you to see aggregate activity across the firm. And so each individual will be able to see their own summary in terms of, time spent by day, week, month, trends over time. But as the administrator, you can also see this aggregate data for anyone in the firm. And then you can kind of see a chart roll up as well of what that aggregate, billable versus non-billable time is. And this has been really helpful to a lot of folks to be able to kind of do that load balancing, figuring out where people are on the path for their billing cycle, right? Do people have a lot of approved entries? Is there a lot of pending time that was captured, but no one's approved it yet? And so do you need to follow up with someone? And yeah, this is a huge one for a lot of firm leaders and administrators.
Great, Nancy. I will have one more question I'd like to ask, but if you wanted to go
Yeah.
to, I know you have that free trial. and we'll let people see that. I will also put this in the chat box for everyone to have access just in case they need to log off because we are at time, but we'll ask this last question. How much additional interaction on an hourly, daily basis does the user have to incorporate when using Billable AI? Or can they rely on Billable's AI at the end of the month when reviewing entries that the entries captured by Billable's AI is accurate and correct?
Yeah, this is a great question, Susanna, because I think it's really important that the software you introduce actually gets adopted. So what we've seen is usually when people start using billables, they just have to spend a few minutes a day kind of reviewing their time entries. That's our best practice. And the reason for that is if you just spend, I showed that screenshot earlier of someone timing themselves and it took him 3 minutes to get through all their time and they billed hours that day, right? It was a lot of time entries. We recommend spending a few minutes a day because the sooner you can kind of correct and approve time entries, the quicker it learns, right? So by the next day, it's applying what you approved from the previous day and using that to inform the entries that it's generating from that point forward. Um, we do have people that wait till the end of the month and kind of review it all at once. And that is fine too. I mean, the time still gets captured no matter what. They just find themselves having to make more revisions because it wasn't learning from them up until that point. But honestly, it's still 90% of the work, right? Is like capturing the time, getting, that narrative in there. So the frank answer is while we have the best practice, people use it in all sorts of ways and it works in all sorts of ways.
Great. Thank you so much. And we are out of time. We do have a couple more questions that are in there. I will send these off to Nancy. I did put the email address, but I'll put there one more time. If you have additional questions, want to connect with Nancy or her team, here is an email address that you can connect with her at. And yes, thank you, Nancy, for this great webinar, giving us all of this great information. We really appreciate it. And attendees, thank you so much for joining us today and spending your last hour here. So with that, Nancy, if you have any final remarks, I will turn it back to you and then we'll close out.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I know spending an hour on timekeeping isn't necessarily everyone's most desirable task, but I really appreciate the engagement and the conversation, and I would love to hear from you. So please reach out. Happy to answer any more questions.